Hello and welcome to the Things and Games YouTube Ant channel. This is the second video of my channel revival, and today we'll be covering the Arizona honeypot ant, also known as Myrmecocystus mexicanus AZ bicolor. And so before we get into this, a channel update, general directions, where we're headed, outlook, and how things are going. So to start off with, where is the channel headed, what are our next uploads, general outlook. Brief updates. First off, I am going to be getting a new camera lens, so even though most of the footage within my videos is sequential from the very first moment or video instance I got my animals, my ants, my frogs, plants, corals, whatever it may be, the end shots and potentially some of the other videos down the road will get much higher quality in terms of the cameras being used and the quality of footage. We'll see how that goes. Next upload most likely will be over my Rhinatoma benedicta yellowhead slash shakushaku slash pamparamosa. However, we'll see where that goes. It could be a zooanthid species. However, most likely I will be doing a different video over a different species of animal other than ants. I understand that last video was pretty sloppy in terms of grammatical vocalizations, using lots of ums and ers. That's something I'm going to be actively working on with this video currently, and something I want to improve. General channel sloppiness will be a thing because while recording this video and my previous one, I am just reading from a notes page with general ideas on what I'd like to do or what comes to my mind. I'll also go off on tangents on specific topics that may be of interest that I just realize or happen to have. These videos are going to continue, at least for now in the interim, to be pretty homemade, pretty casually done. And so, with all that being said, I understand at the time of this recording, it is Sunday, September 21st of 2025. Last video, I did say I would be uploading a weekly schedule. I hope I just can make it a weekend, at least every single weekend upload. I did have yesterday's video recorded, however, I wasn't very happy with the script, the recording itself, and so I wanted to redo it. And so without further ado, getting into Myrmecocystus mexicanus Arizona bicolor. And a quick preface on my colony is the footage that you're watching. They're currently 6 months old at about, I want to say 100 to 200 workers again. However, I'm very bad at counting. They are being housed in a Tar Heel ants lair, and currently that is the footage, or that is the end footage you will see of this specific colony. And so, just as the last video, I want to get into the general biology, care tips, and any other useful or interesting information I know about this specific species. And so to start off with, again, what is Myrmecocystus mexicanus? More specifically, what is Myrmecocystus mexicanus bicolor? Myrmecocystus mexicanus and Myrmecocystus in general are a closely related species to Lasius, another species of ant. Lasius is also related to Prenolepis. Within Prenolepis imparis, the winter honeypot ant, which is not a Myrmecocystus species, they are found more so on the within the eastern U.S. They will make repletes. They are not true honeypot ants though, and they are not Myrmecocystus. Lasius are thought to have been the older family or the older species that Myrmecocystus then evolved from into things like your nocturnal honeypot ants, such as Myrmecocystus mexicanus, testaceus, Christiania, Ewardii, Navajo, and other species such as that. Getting into the main family groups of Myrmecocystus, you have Myrmecocystus, which is stuff like Myrmecocystus yuma, and I believe Cratoni, Myrmecocystus, which are going to be your predominantly nocturnal species, such as Myrmecocystus christianae, Mexicanus, the ones we're covering today, Testaceus, as well as some other nocturnal species. And then finally, you have your Endiodiocetes, which are going to be your more diurnally active, more tuned foragers for daytime activities. That's going to be stuff like Myrmecocystus placodops and Myrmecocystus Kennedii groups, Myrmecocystus placodops, as well as other things. Just pulling up the quick Wikipedia page on different groups. Endiodiocetes has the Melliger complex, like Myrmecocystus melliger, Mendax, placodops, semirufus. Myrmecocystus mimicus is also within the Endiodiocetes, Mimicus and Depolis, and then Kennedii, you have Cathjulia, Kennedii, Wheeleri. A lot of these species I keep personally, Flaviceps, Romenii, and then you have your Myrmecocystus, your more heat-tolerant species, also oftentimes smaller than both the Endiodiocetes and Myrmecocystus groups, of which I have Yuma. And then finally, you have your Myrmecocystus groups of your Mexicanus, Pyramicus, Testaceus, and your unplaced Christiania. I have Melanoticus, Navajo. I had Awardi, they didn't do well in Testaceus and Christiania. Point being that Myrmecocystus, not Mexicanus, belong to the Myrmecocystus group. This group is more closely related to the older family groups of the honeypot ants, such as Lasius. They more so devolved directly from them. Kind of continuing on that note, it is thought that stuff like Myrmecocystus, Testaceus directly then evolved into things like Myrmecocystus, Mexicanus, Bicolor, and Myrmecocystus Navajo. The smaller species evolved into stuff like Myrmecocystus, Mexicanus, large like Nevada variants, or other things. I'm not sure. This is more so anecdotal, but this is the general idea that these species then evolved or grew out of more young or older species groups. Myrmecocystus mexicanus Arizona bicolor variant. They look very similar to Testaceus in some ways, especially where the workers are more so like a golden brown bicolor. Whereas stuff like Navajo, you have more so a general paler color complexion, and they look a lot more like, bigger Myrmecocystus mexicanus from Nevada look a lot more like Navajo than they do Testaceus, just kind of color-wise, and also just they look like a supersized Navajo. Point being, though, that specifically Myrmecocystus mexicanus Arizona, I'll just start calling them Mexicanus AZ or bicolor Mexicanus, are thought to be driven from Testaceus. They are related to Lasius, and you can, Testaceus and Lasius actually, for example, look pretty similar. But continuing on, general biology, Myrmecocystus mexicanus is a large nocturnal species of honeypot ant. They belong to the Mexicanus species, which is the largest of the Myrmecocystus group, and it is thought, based on my personal observations, my bicolor Mexicanus are larger than my Placodopso 1. They are an older colony, though, and they are producing larger workers. It'll be interesting to see how my Placodopso 1 shape up to them. I also have an even bigger, queen size at least, Myrmecocystus mexicanus from the Nevada general area. I believe it's Nevada. I could be getting this incorrect, but that queen is bigger than my bicolor. However, these factors can also, I think, vary between health of the population, how strong of a lates they are producing, and their general aptitude in terms of like how the colony was, etc., in producing big, large, healthy elites. It could be that Placodopso 1 truly are the largest Myrmecocystus as they are thought to be, and that my colony is just has a smaller individual. Well, I will find out. And so continuing, Myrmecocystus mexicanus, i.e. bicolor, why be nocturnal? Why do they develop these physical traits? Let me get into those traits real quick. They are bicolor as opposed to most Mexicanus, which are more so pale or yellow. In my opinion, this bicolorness may be a product of them being more diurnally active, especially during dusk and dawn. If you look at photos of them on a naturalist, they seem like they're going to be a little bit more active. However, this is all anecdotal. This is something I've actually gone out and seen personally. It is my hunch, though, that just like with the Endodiocities, which are going to be darker in coloration, the Mexicanus bicolor potentially are a Mexicanus variant or locality, which are going to be more actively diurnal. I do think they're predominantly going to be nocturnal. Mine are more active around starting at dusk into the night and kind of not active as much during the day. They don't really stand on anything. So I believe that they are just going to be predominantly, as with most other Myrmecocystus group, and Mexicanus specifically, a nocturnal species. With that being said, they are also a very, very large species. The reason, in my opinion, why I think they're so large is what I've been told or I have learned is that Myrmecocystus will establish species dominance in terms of certain areas. And when you look at Myrmecocystus mexicanus and their specific ranges of southern, I would say more so eastern, southeastern, northeastern Arizona predominantly, where you can find them. They are around some other species of Myrmecocystus, Myrmecocystus mimicus, Mendax, as well as some other very, very predatory diurnal ants like Nova Mesococcorelli, as well as some very, very active nocturnal species such as Phytolarea, covered in last video. I believe that Myrmecocystus Mexicanus AZ bicolor are going to be more so dominant in their area, just given their size and how active they are. I think that they are found next to other Myrmecocystus such as Testaceus nocturnal. I think that they're going to be more dominant. What I've been told is that most often in an area you'll have your predominantly dominant diurnal species and nocturnal species, and those don't bother each other because they have different foraging hours. And then you might have your other species. This seems like it makes sense given the photos and kind of the ranges where Mexicanus bicolor are found, where you have Mendax, which is a very large diurnal honeypot ant, and then you also have smaller diurnals like Flaviceps and Mimicus, which I believe those Mendax are probably out competing. This is why The Mendax are the most common in that area, and then you have Testacea also within the areas of AZ bicolor, however, not nearly as common, given that I bet the Mexicanus are much more competitive, being larger individuals with larger colonies, larger sizes. In terms of colony size, Myrmecocystus, in terms of the Mexicanus group, AZ bicolor seem like they have more medium-sized nests where they're not quite as getting as massive as the Nevada variants or California variants, but also they're not quite as small as some of your California variants or smaller species like the tiger stripe. I have to go out and ask. This is all kind of anecdotal information off the top of my head, but more so like a medium within the Mexicanus group. Uh, in terms of colony size, I don't think they're getting super massive colonies in the wild. In terms of body structure, they're very slender. Ants are very large, though. My colony, I think, has started to produce full-size workers. Myrmecocystus in general, as a genus, do produce very small initial workers. Their nanetics are definitely smaller, and then over time they gain larger and larger workers. Uh, Covering the color may be an indicator of activity. I do think that them being bicolor maybe perhaps means they're more active during the day when they don't need to. Where paler color might signify that they're more purely nocturnal and they don't need pigment to help shield them from the sun. In terms of relation to mimicry, in terms of things like Mimicus and Testacea, quick tangent here. Personally, I think it's interesting how, well, I'll get into this specifically. No, I don't see a lot of other keepers keeping multiple different localities or variants of the same species as where you might with dart frogs. Granitmea, Imitator fantastica, Benedicta, they all have very different localities. And Imitator, of course, being imitating a fantastica is interesting. Whereas I don't know why Mimicus are named Mimicus. I'd have to look into that. I don't know if they have some kind of Bayesian mimicry with stuff like in other Endodio cities such as Placodops or Mendax and what the deal is with that, or if this is deriven from them, or if it's something more like Mexicanus, which are driven from stuff like Navajo or Testaceous and why they do that. But that tangent is it's just interesting to me as someone who's attempting to keep the four known different varieties of locales that I know of being like the very giant orange ones, the more plain yellow ones. My queen, that one's not doing well at all, and the tiger, which I had a queen of, but she died of overexposure after coming and shipping. Her tube got too hot, and she just didn't. She was alive, but she didn't make it more than a night. Point being that it is interesting that within the ant keeping hobby, people don't look to keep localities more often than not. They'll just get the species that they want and maybe the specific locality, but they're not interested in keeping other localities. I'm going to try to keep multiple different localities of Myrmecocystus mexicanus, just because I think they're a really cool species and I want to learn the differences between them, how they behave, what they do. For example, Myrmecocystus Mexicanus Nevada, like large, the super large orange variant, they make absolutely huge crater-sized nests with just covered in rocks and these giant volcano-looking entrances to the nest, whereas AZ bicolor kind of just like holes in the sand. It'd be really interesting to see how they behave, and if I can get them a proper setup, observe some of these, especially when they're at a better size, observe some of these behaviors. As far as, again, where bicolor AZ range, predominantly within Arizona and in the eastern side of Arizona, southeast. Again, getting on their physical traits, large eyes for nocturnal behavior, very large individuals, I think that just so they can outcompete. I think also so they can defend the nest. You have your nocturnal species that might be opportunistic, your dwarf myrmecs and other things, which I think they'll be able to kill. That's why apparently it's thought that stuff like Testaceous may be nocturnal so they can avoid some of the more diurnal species. But then also in their area you have stuff like Phydolia. If y'all have ever seen that documentary over Myrmecocystus mimicus in Horseshoe Canyon of Arizona, they're around Nova Messer, Phydolia, and Myrmecocystus mexicanus AZ bicolor. You can see in the footage, it's very cool stuff. My question is then, are they perhaps getting this large size so they're able to better overpower and overcome different workers or different whenever they come across at night? I don't see them doing that necessarily. However, this kind of gets into their habitat, why they might need to develop these adaptations and what they're doing. Myrmecocystus will forage for just about any insect material they can get. However, I'll get into this more with the care. I have noticed that they prefer smaller particulates. They also will forage at night or at day, depending on what group they belong to, species, etc. Love to forage for sugars and nectars, predominantly from shrub-like trees. I don't know the species name exactly, but you can find out on the Myrmecocystus placodops wiki page some examples of some of the shrubs they're drinking from. They're drinking from nectar, they're controlling these territories, and that's how they're getting their sustenance so they can survive over drought periods. That's why Myrmecocystus are so effective, and also why their workers, I think, live so long, is because they really do feed their workers, and there's a priority for them to save each and every individual worker within the nest. I think that they have evolved to retain longer lifespans than your average ant, so that they're able to overwinter, over drought, over drought with their sugar reserves, feed those workers carbohydrates and sugar to keep them going, because they don't need protein. They're finished developing, and they can save off the brood as long as they have workers. I think that Myrmecocystus play a very conservative game in terms of how they're structuring themselves, what they do. Obviously, being honeypot ants, you're going to find them in rocky, sandy soil. Other than that, I have noticed mine stacking rocks, kind of like your other Mexicanus varieties. However, in images and videos, it seems online that they're just going to be making your more so hole-in-the-ground nests. And finally, getting into the care of my Myrmecocystus Mexicanus bicolor, what I do, what's worked, what hasn't. This also will get into some of the other things I've noticed in Myrmecocystus in general, because their care is mostly the same. I really don't have a species in my care currently that is that drastically different from one another. Things might change depending on their size when they're being moved into nests or what I'm feeding them, but this general overarching info is what I'll get into. Also, the specifics for my bicolor colony specifically. In terms of founding them, I got mine, I believe 8 or 12 workers. You'll be able to count in the video. They require heat. Again, most ants in the U.S., southern U.S., are ectothermic. They are going to require heat in order to be able to develop. Temperature is a very important factor in considering. I think that they could do. I know that they can. They can survive and produce workers or just produce in general in room temp. That is a terrible idea, though. They really do need heat to get going. In terms of how I founded them in incubators, keeping them at 85 degrees all the way up to 92. I wouldn't recommend that. I'll get into more why in a second. But I've founded them with tinfoil wrapped around their test tubes connected to an outworld with a heat cable draped directly over that tube, about 2 centimeters from the PVA sponge they were in. Whenever you're going to found Myrmecocystus, cannot recommend enough use PVA sponge. It is basically the hobby standard for where we're founding them. I've used it in each and every one of my colonies, and I've so far raised from founding queen Myrmecocystus wheeleri, Placodops, Placodops 01, Mexicanus bicolor, and basically, and Semi-Rufus. This is just what's worked for me. Secondly, colony Myrmecocystus need ventilation. All of my Myrmecocystus are kept in open top enclosures covered by about an inch thick of fluon. It's about 5 centimeters from top to bottom. Not touching the bottom, but they do need open air. I've noticed that really helps with their development. They appreciate that, and they like being able to regulate. Same thing with in terms of heating the nest. My Myrmecocystus Mexicanus AZ bicolor, they have the choice of where to heat. I try to have heat over a water tower on the THA mini hearths that I use for Myrmecocystus. I have a test tube basically just pressed up against the glass, not perfectly against it, or not perfectly in sync, but that seems like to be enough heat for them to raise. I don't think they could go as fast. I've noticed that people with very healthy colonies, they actually use heat lamps. I might do this, but heat lamps pointed at their setups in their labs or whatever come to mind. Instagram user Nerbs Ants, Caltech, I believe. That seems to be a very effective way. Just general incubators seem to be a good way to keep constant temp. That's a little bit difficult in an open area room where I also, want to live, and I'm not trying to have my room in Arizona temperatures heating up at 85 degrees. So I use heat cables. That's what worked well for me. I've raised multiple different species, not besides Myrmecocystus that way. Seems to work as long as you're messing around with it and playing with it. In any case, as long as they have access to a heat cable, or they're putting in incubators in founding or whatever have you, as long as they have that heat at 85 and can also regulate, maybe get to a cooler side, they're happy. That's also why ventilation is important, so they can have heat in that nest, but also they might have some room temp air blowing in, not very actively, more so passively, but just the ability to regulate, I think, is helpful for them to be able to raise. Secondly, fluids are very important for Myrmecocystus. They need constant access to water, or they will crash. They will lose workers. I've just noticed that they need water, especially when you're heating them at the temps you do. They need either access to a PVA sponge in a test tube, or I use Nestmates in all my Tar Heel ant setups for my Myrmecocystus. That is just that important. They will lose workers if you could not feed them, you cannot give them sugar. They need water. It's just how they are, or they will die. Also, along with that, constant sugar is ideal. All of my Myrmecocystus have constant access to, especially the founding colonies that don't yet have repletes, have constant access to sugars. That greatly helps them, feeds the queen, feeds the workers, keeps everybody happy and healthy. In terms of, for what I use in terms of or in terms of nectar or hummingbird sugars, I've made both sugar water. However, I've noticed that the best solution, just the easiest thing to do, is Perky Pet Clear hummingbird nectar. I like the clear look. You can definitely make your colony look rainbow. You can use, red 40 inside of your food dye. You can just buy like red or yellow or whatever other color hummingbird nectar you want and give that to them, and they'll have multicolor pleats. It's cool to look at. In terms of actual feeding and protein offerings, I've seen them take mealworms from friends. However, personally, I give mine roach nymphs and fruit flies, both Melanogaster and Drosophila melanogaster and Drosophila hydei. For my smaller colonies, I might give them more Melanogaster. However, it's just more so about, in terms of feeding protein, how the volume of protein per brood. I try to feed as much with all my colonies as much whenever I feed every day or other day or every 3 days. It just depends. In general, whenever I feed, I want to feed them as much protein mass as they have brood, even if like it's not all larvae. It's just kind of what I do. For my AZ bicolor, I'll give them as many fruit flies as or roaches, but they prefer fruit flies. I'll get into more why later, like I said I would, but they prefer in general to be fed fruit flies so they can individually particularly feed their prey, and I give them just as much protein mass or matter as they have larvae. Again, heat will also speed up the development of larvae. That's why heating is important to the teacher. I'm not advocating, as earlier I said, they can do it. They can raise slowly and painfully, but give them heat. They need that. If you're going to get animals, it's your responsibility, again, to give them the best possible care you can with the knowledge you have. Heat your Myrmecocystus or don't get them. The general cycle within their brood is they're kind of odd. With a lot of my colonies, until they get to like a large size, like my AZ bicolor, they'll kind of do a thing where they might have like larvae and pupae, or like really young larvae and pupae, or they might have really like just eggs and super large larvae, like or just like, well, they only have pupae, they only have larvae, they only have eggs. Not never really eggs, but like it seems like they're kind of cyclic in terms of their brood cycle. They're not going to be like a Phaidoli, so don't be alarmed when you don't have like every single stage of brood. It seems kind of what the queens will do, where also they'll hide them. They'll hide it for some reason, but it seems like that's what they'll do is they'll have like one stage of brood and just kind of how they're going. It's odd, I know. It seems really almost intimidating or scary. Like why do they not have multiple stages? And you won't really see that, I've noticed, until you have larger colonies. This is a constant with all of my Myrmecocystus in any stage. It's not until they get even my Placodops 01, which are pretty large, not quite as big as my AZ bicolor, but just pretty large. Don't have near. They'll have some of each stage, but they don't have nearly as many as like my AZ bicolor and everything else, like my Wheelori, Mimicus, Cannedii. Sorry, not Cannedii. Oh, yeah, I had Cannedii, but Mendax, everything, which you'll see videos of course. They all have kind of single stage or two stages of brood at any given time. It's just the oddest thing. It's just how they work. Other interesting things I've noticed with them when rehousing them, you can taste the air when you work with them. Whenever you rehouse them, they spray that formic acid everywhere. The air becomes acidic and like lemony, citrusy, and your eyes get irritated. They don't hurt, but they definitely spray acid. Whenever they take down prey, they like to bite stuff and then just grab onto it and spray formic acid into that wound. That's how they take down fruit flies almost instantly. Fruit flies are probably your best bet in terms of feeding. They're just the easiest thing, easy to culture. Make your cultures every 2 weeks. Have a crash. Don't. Ooh, bad voice crack. Don't go out and buy fruit fly cultures. Please make your own. It's far cheaper. Just be on top of it. It's the easiest way you can feed your ant colonies. Super easy. Just tap the fruit flies into the nest off of the open air outworld, and that's not even 30 seconds of effort, and you just fed your colony 100 fruit flies that they're going to demolish. My AZ bicolor go nuts for fruit flies. They will come out during the day to eat them if they realize there's fruit flies in the outworld. That is kind of that's the general overview of their care. What I've noticed with them. Very impressive, very beautiful ant species. Love them very much. And that is the general overview of my Myrmecocystus mexicanus AZ bicolor. I believe I've gone over everything. I'm just checking to make sure in my notes that I have. I'm sure I'm missing some things. Maybe I'll type them in the comments whenever I like. Again, that's why I scrapped yesterday's script. I like to have all of the information relevant in one video at a time, so people don't have to go digging through comments or anything like that. And no, I think that's it. Aside from having some information on some of the plants they might draw from, just kind of cool biological information, what specific like biotopic in situ environments they have, just rocky soil, rocky sand, Arizona, living off shrubs. I don't know. I did at one point remember the shrub names. No, I'm not about to search up the video and search up the Wikipedia page during an active video or film, but yeah, you can definitely find out resources. It'd be interesting to see someone take like flowers or whatever from these specific shrubs and see if their Myrmecocystus will drink from them. It'd be cool. I've offered flowers to mine. They didn't really seem interested in it. It could just be just doesn't work. You can't really pick them. Things to consider. General overview again. Fluid's important. Give them constant sugars as soon as they have workers, basically. For founding colonies, I drop sugar droplets on pieces of tin and put it inside their nest. Oh, they need sand. They need sand to spin cocoons. Whenever you're founding them, give them sand. It doesn't have to be a lot. It could literally be a pinch, like 2 pinches of sand inside of a test tube, and they're good. I've also done mine with like tons of sand and just like basically filled it to like a fourth level. Give them sand. They need sand to spin cocoons. They will develop workers. It's just I've noticed it doesn't. It almost seems like they don't do as well, or that they kind of fail. It's odd, but I've noticed the Myrmecocystus can have workers. They just won't spin cocoons, and that'll go straight from larvae to pupae. Obviously, that's not what they're meant to do. They want to spin cocoons. Give them cocoons. Their larvae will go pretty fast. It is a slow process, but kind of once they get going, they get velocity, they'll get going. You'll notice that they'll be very activators. Larvae are very active from Myrmecocystus odd. Maybe why they like giving them single particulate foods is so they can actually spot feed and target every single one of the brood, their brood, a specific predatum, because they just are so mobile. Perhaps they just grow very fast. I haven't really tracked that. Perhaps you can in this video. 6 months old colony. Maybe you'll be able to tell kind of as you watch what they've been doing in terms of speed. I'm not exactly familiar. I don't really look into that. But yeah, that's my Mexicanus AZ Bicolor. All information I have for y'all today. Just quick closing notes and general update. Next video should hopefully be Renitzman benedicta yellowhead with a feature on Shakushaku Pampanomosa. Inside of this video, you probably saw different variants, some of the different variants I currently have of current and pre-past. Some died. Of my Mexicanus. New lenses hopefully coming, and then yeah, just general, hopefully cleaning up sloppiness. I'm still not going to go and make dedicated scripts. I don't like talking like that. I prefer to just speak off my mind and what I know. General footage coming out in terms of next ant video in 2 weeks to a month to a month and a half. What that might be, or sorry, not even that. Weekly upload schedule, getting on that. I'm not sure exactly what species. I'll do a vote. Phydola millicida might be next. That was one that was heavily requested within a voting poll I did recently. But other than that, in terms of plant species, I might be trying to go do something on Philodendron varicosum blue, perhaps something else, what other plants I might want. Maybe I'll make general plant videos because I'm not as experienced with those. Could go into zoanthids, looking at JPS Mystique zoanthids, very cool zoanthid, very awesome zoanthid. Might cover that one, very easy to take care of. But yeah, that is the general channel outlook, weekly schedule, what I'm looking to do. Thanks for tuning in, y'all. That is the Things and Games YouTube channel. Have a good one.